All 5 members of the Administration and Finance Committee are present. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes as listed in our agenda?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Then moving on to item D, new and previous matters, new matters for consideration, the 2019-2023 Capital Improvement Program, draft number 2. I think Ms. Stino, this is you.
It is. So the CIP that we handed out back in early August looks like this. Since then, the Capital Improvement Committee has been doing a lot of work, met about 4 to 5 times, and has a recommendation, which you have in front of you tonight.
This is the same as the email?
It is. So this document is the recommendation. This one still has all of the project details. There's about 140 pages of project details, so they're on the online versions as well. And we can share more paper copies if you need them. But basically, the recommendation you have in front of you for the 5-year plan is the one that I handed out tonight. It is a full 5-year plan. This is the first time we've had a full 5-year plan, so that's something we're pretty proud of. Took a lot of work, mostly Pete Daniels from Public Works, because obviously the vast majority of the plan happens to be engineering information, but he worked really hard on getting all of the out years set up, and I know he keeps it in his form, but then we kind of asked him to change all the formats and things like that. So what you have in front of you is what's been recommended by the Capital Improvement Committee. We do have 2 parts to the plan. The 2019 plan, that's the part that we're going to ask you to consider this year. The night of the budget consideration, November 20th, we would like some action on the 2019 CIP. The years 2020 to 23 are really just meant as a planning tool to give you some information on what we're looking at, and I'm sure a lot of council members have contributed to the plan as well over the next 5 years, but then those get refined as they get closer to the current year. So if we flip to the details, we do have it separated out into what we would call our borrowing standards, which means streets and related infrastructure, and then we go through the utilities, and then we have property improvements and equipment improvements. Just to cut to the chase a little bit, the blue columns in the middle of the page to the right side, that's where we're at with funding as of right now. Capital Improvement Committee's purview was not to determine funding. That's obviously the council's and staff's. So right now you will see just shy of $1 million that we don't believe has a funding bucket per se, $993,300 if you look on page 8. We do have some plans for that, but we want to bring that to the council. We do the statutory borrowing the ordinance borrowing, that's $2,700,050. And we have some of the items in our operating budget, approximately $900,000. Some of the items are being funded through the 2018 budget. And then we do have the remainder of what we would call the streets borrowing listed in the carryover, about $270,000. That would be the streets, or the alleys on page 4, as well as the sidewalk program on page 6. So basically, the way we did it last year, we had approximately $1.1 million. At this time of year, the committee basically said $723,000 we should use from 2018 remainder funds if possible, so we didn't have to borrow. We did have a plan to borrow $450,000. We did not have to do it because we were able to do the extra $450,000 from remainder funds. I can't tell you for sure tonight that that's where that is. I do have one piece of this left to do, and that's one more good estimate on 2018. But right now, my inclination is to say we should hold off on that funding source for the 993 because I believe we will be able to capture at least the majority of it through any funds we would have left from the 2018 budget. Therefore, we won't have to borrow additional funds in 2019. And we do have the department heads here if anybody has questions on specific projects or if you want to talk about the funding.
And I think I'll add to what you had just addressed, Peggy, and yeah, there was discussion at our capital improvement committee of perhaps coming to the council with a revised charter ordinance to increase our debt limit, our total amount of debt that we would take out. And you're saying that you've been able to review the budget and that's not necessary at this point?
Right, at this point, it is not necessary. However, I'm glad you brought it up because I think in the future, especially with the level of projects happening in 2020, that is going to be something we're going to want to at least consider next year. But it would be really good if we could do that outside of the budget process, perhaps in the beginning of 2019. And then there was one other thing I didn't mention, and that's that green column. So as the capital improvement committee was going through with the recent study that we had done by McKinstry for facilities, what we did is anything that was not the highest priority, i.e. needs to be done immediately, was referred to a subcommittee. The subcommittee met for the first time just within the last month here, and we will be meeting again to talk about priorities for the facilities going forward. Many of them will be in the 2020 plan and beyond. But for right now, one of the recommendations from the subcommittee is if we could get, when we go through and do how much do we have left from 18, if we could get maybe about $500,000 that we could put in reserve for any high priority items that perhaps would fail during 19, that would help us bridge the gap between now and the 2020 plan when we fully start implementation of the facilities improvements.
Questions from the committee?
Mr. Chair?
Alderman May.
I just want to comment that a couple of years ago when we redid the Capital Improvements Committee, there was a goal to get something like this. It's a true 5-year plan. It looks very well organized, and you can tell that the committee's doing very hard work. And so I want to thank everyone on the committee for that work. I did want to ask one question. The railroad bridge maintenance, which bridge is that?
That's not an identified one at this point, but just knowing that we have those needs in the community.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else?
Mr. Chair,
Alderman Weigel.
I would just also like to add that, I guess in the past, we had kind of used to rely on carryovers, money that wasn't budgeted directly for one thing and then ended up being used by another. And I know we've been driving our department heads to budget more accurately, so that's a good thing. But it means that we don't have this little extra, I won't call it a pot of money, but I mean, it's good that we're getting everything in the budget, or we're working towards that at least, so that we can all vote on things, we can see things, discuss things, and not like, oh, we have an extra 10K for that, or whatever. So,
Correct.
So I'm glad to see that we're moving in that direction.
And so 18 is a bit of a transition year. I would say 19 for sure. We took that a lot further for the 2019 budget. I wouldn't expect there to be as many remainder funds in 19, but 2018, I think that's why I'm suggesting $1 million, just less than $1 million. I think that's still going to be available. But yes, you're right, that is definitely our goal.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the capital improvement program? All right, we're not going to vote on this tonight. We'll vote on it as part of the budget at our recess council meeting coming up. And so then moving on to item 3, the 2019 City of West Allis Mayor's recommended budget. Is this still you, Peggy, or is this Rebecca?
It depends how you like to approach this. If you'd like to have an update on the state information and the preliminary tax rate, or if you wanted to have a discussion regarding questions in the budget first.
Why don't you do your update first, please, and then
That is actually Peggy's.
That's Peggy. All right, thank you.
So we are still waiting for some state information. The first thing, though, we talk about levy limits often. So that's how much can we levy, how much can we tax our citizens. This year's net new construction in the city, and net new construction, when I say that, keep in mind, all of our net new construction was in TIFs. However, for the levy restrictions, that counts. So we got about $186,000 for that. But we also have this qualifier in the levy limits called post-2005 debt. Well, because we only typically borrow for 10 years on our debt, we really don't have any pre-2005 debt, which is lowering our base levy. So that's a good thing. But in 2019, we are not being restrained by levy limits. It's our own restraints as far as what's a prudent amount of taxes versus the levy limits. There was an adjustment for the change in personal property. The old Schedule C items, tools, machinery, and patterns, no longer there. However, the state did replace it with a property aid payment from the state. We actually have a meeting with DOR. All the finance directors have a roundtable meeting with DOR tomorrow to talk about some of the, maybe the more minute details of how that's going, because I think there just wasn't enough time to think it through. But basically, the payment's gonna be right around 400,000, and we're just trying to make sure right now that we can still keep the TIFs whole as far as personal property that's being contributed to the TIF, so that we can make sure those projects balance out, as well as once the TIFs are gone, we would like that in the general aid payment. We don't want it to just go away. So those are the two things we're gonna be talking to the DOR about tomorrow. But in 2019, we're not being restrained by levy limits. The next major program is expenditure restraint, i.e. the state says measured spending, keep your spending under control, and they will pay an aid payment. We are also not under a restraint this year for that because of where we're at. The current CPI, Consumer Price Index factor, is coming in at about 2.4%. We won't have that number until November 1st from the DOR, but early estimates are not showing that we're close to that, i.e. again, it comes back down to where are we at with taxes, and if we were to go with the most we could tax, it would be a lot. It would be like 3 times what we're proposing in this budget right now. So it's definitely not restraining us. There was a slight adjustment in the 2019 transportation aids. We have budgeted basically about 33,000, I'm sorry, that's not the right number. Oh yeah, it is, sorry. 33,000 less than we had planned for. Again, in a $61 million budget, that's not something I need you to adjust, because we are budgeting pretty conservatively still. So just to let you know that the aids did come out second week of October, and there's a $33,000 variance. So then, those are all the state items. I don't know if there's any questions on that. Otherwise, we can talk preliminary tax rate.
Mr. Chair,
Alderman White.
just real quickly, how close to the levy limit and expenditure restraint are we, whether it's in dollar or percentage wise?
Levy limit, we're about 1.2 million away, but keep in mind, that's with the add-on for debt, our debt payment. So really, we have about a $1.2 million cushion there.
Okay.
On the expenditure restraint side, it's 888,000 with my current estimates.
That's great. Well done, us.
Thank you, economy, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, helps too.
That too.
So then, as far as the tax rates, I just received the last of the manufacturing values today. But there were some things we knew. We already knew our assessed value would be going down. It went down by about 41 million. Our assessed value in TIDS actually went up, so our general base went down even more than that. But overall, our total assessed value is down 41 million. The estimated rate for 2018 would be $11.53. That's comparing to $11.25. 28-cent increase is approximately $42 per $150,000 home.
How much was that?
$42, 28 cents on the rate, and on a $150,000 home, that's $42. And then 1 penny of taxes, this is sometimes a common thing to talk about, 1 penny of taxes is worth about $37,000. So when you're doing your deliberations, just something to keep in mind.
Okay, all right. Any discussion discussion? Any questions for Ms. Stino?
Mr. Chair?
Alderman May?
I just want to comment that, again, I want to thank all the department heads that I had reached out to, that I had a lot of questions of, and everyone answered my questions very satisfactorily. I think the mayor did a wonderful job on this budget. Really, there's not much to pick apart in here. It's got a lot of good stuff in here. There were two things I wanted to bring up for staff to look into a little bit further before we approve the budget. The first one being in the building inspection and neighborhood services area on page 210. It's mentioned about the neighborhood services liaison position becoming a full-time position. And I apologize to the mayor today for not bringing this up to him sooner, but something I'd like to see more in the 3rd district and other districts outside of the 1st and 2nd is a little bit more proactive enforcement of our property maintenance codes and things like that. And so I asked Ed to take a look, see how much it might cost to do something like that, to make this position more of a full-time position, and to be able to do more of that proactive work. And his estimate came in around $30,000. And if it's good with the rest of the committee, what I'd like to do is ask the staff to work together, Rebecca and Ed, to go through and see exactly a more exact, precise amount, or if there'd be a way to even do it without a budgetary increase, if the rest of the committee would agree to that.
Yeah, and that sounds good to me. I think I'm looking for consensus here, or we can make a motion and do this more formal, just looking for feedback from the committee here. Do you agree with what Alderman May is saying?
Agreed.
Suggesting?
Like,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair,
Alderman
and
Weigel.
Alderman Chapletsky probably can, agree with, this has been very effective in the 1st and 2nd district, having these people out there on the ground doing these write-ups, it's definitely worth it. I think it's been primarily just in the 1st and 2nd district so far, right?
Primarily. And then, Mr. Chair,
Please.
one additional one that I called you on as well today, and I talked to Peggy and Rebecca and the mayor and development department, is we've got news that the Hobo store on Highway 100 may soon be closing. And along with that, there is the vacant Pick and Save that's been there vacant for quite a while, the vacant Burger King for a while, we've got the vacant Sam's Club. And so what I'd also like to direct staff to do is to see if there would be a way to find approximately $75,000 to $100,000 to do a master plan in terms of land use and development along Highway 100 from about Lapham to the North City limit, and on Greenfield from the railroad track, which is approximately 105th, out to about 116th. That would cover all that area. And my goal would be, again, if there'd be a way to do it without raising property taxes. So if we could direct staff to maybe take on that task and report back if there'd be a way to do that, if the rest of the committee would agree. I will say that the mayor sound open to the idea. So
Yeah, it sounds like a good idea to me, absolutely. Similar to what the Department of Development has already done with the National Avenue corridor and developed land engineering. Right, it looks like it's, the other thing too is, in the past, we've been able to focus our efforts like that on the east side of our city. Typically, the east side of the city was in greater need of redevelopment efforts versus the Highway 100 corridor. The Highway 100 corridor would just seem to take care of itself always. There's enough traffic that the city could just let things happen more so. That's changing, and that's what we're seeing here, that we need to be more active.
Mr. Chair.
Alderman Vitale.
Yeah, I would like to ask, do we have any definite amount from the state, what the share revenue that we'll be getting by the end of October? That's news, because I hear, money, a lot of money around, we talk about it. But how much are we getting from the state, in regards to some of the transportations, issues, and everything else? So I understand that that's the unknown at this time,
So as far as there's a couple different pieces of state aid, so I could just walk through it. The shared revenue itself is about 7.3 million for 2019, and that's really the same as last year, $3,000 difference. The expenditure restraint money we get for following the expenditure restraint program is about 1.5 million. That one went up by 13,000. Nothing new expected for the exempt computer aid because they now changed that. So we were gonna get CPI for 1 year and it's gonna be flat going forward. So that's about 178,000. The personal property aid, that's a new it's really just replacing property taxes in the past. That's 406,000. The municipal services payment we get from the state is approximately 200,000. We will not know on that until the beginning of January, what the final number will be.
That's the state fair related?
That, all the state facilities within your city get, evaluated, and then there's, of course, a share of it. I think last year they funded it at 39%. And then the transportation aids we talked about a little earlier, those are just, they're actually still up from last year, but up from 2 years ago, but lower than they were last year by about 33,000 in the budget. And that's it for the we call them the big 6 state revenues.
Okay. Well, then going back to Alderman May's suggestion, I'm looking for consensus from the committee again to proceed with that idea. Any thoughts?
Well, if we can find the money, it's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the idea, to direct staff to find the money, shake the money tree. Of course, as always, yeah. Yeah. Pete went to his wallet, thank you, Pete, yeah. All right, yeah. All right. Any further discussion, any further issues on the budget? All right, seeing none, then moving on to item 4, which is a discussion regarding city organizational structure and the city attorney position. Now I think this is Ms. Creel.
The committee had asked that we put this item on the agenda for this evening. I had provided to committee members different organizational chart options. One was the city attorney reporting to the mayor, and then the other was the city attorney reporting to the city administrator, as with the other departments. I also had provided information from the revised municipal code regarding the appointing authorities, as well as the recruitment and hiring process for executive positions, and information on our comparables and their structures.
Thank you. Yeah, and to start the discussion, my preference would be to have the city attorney report to the city administrator. That's consistent with all of our other department heads. An alternative, I just don't want the city attorney reporting to us as a council. It needs to be someone who is here full-time. That is not what us council members are. So I'm glad, so with the city attorney, a proposal of the city attorney reporting to the mayor, I'm more okay with that than reporting to us as a council. Those are my thoughts to start out with.
Mr. Chair,
Alderman Chablis.
I haven't changed my point of view, where I think that city attorney should just report to the mayor and common council, not just the mayor, simply because they're the ones that are elected officials. They're the ones that have to answer directly to the people. And I think the city attorney's position is different than other positions, where they give legal opinion to every single department we have. I think that it's important that they don't feel micromanaged or pushed in certain positions. And I haven't changed my view since the last time we debated this.
I also like the idea, again, of it being under the mayor and the common council. Just the idea of having a person in charge of legal things being separate from all of our policy implementation type of things. I like the idea of having the legal advice separate from the rest of the organization. With, of course, the instruction that they must work together and things like that. We would have more control than when the city attorney was an elected position. It was an elected position, the person could do whatever they wanted. So I think this is definitely a step in the right direction, no matter which way we go. But I would prefer it be under the mayor and the common council, again, to keep the legal aspect separate from the policy implementation aspect.
Mr. Chair,
Alderman Vitale.
no, in my estimations, really, throughout the years, with the elected position of the city attorney, what really would make a difference now if whoever's gonna be the new city attorney, to, if we have any questions, any issue that rises within a city, I believe that still we have some authority to really talk to the city attorney, and I'm sure his job is to give us some good advice, whether now or the same the way it was before, the way I dealt with Scott and other city attorney in the past. So I never really, I would experience, I think, no problem anyway, really, by, in a way, separate between the two bodies. But still, if they do something wrong, still I believe in overall, we still have the authority to fire that city attorney, really. I mean, in my estimation. So really, what's the problem from before or even now with the appointment? I don't foresee really any critical issue that will affect the council or the mayors or the community, really. Still, in overall, there's some responsibility for the person in charge of that department, really. Like I said, I'm fine the way I feel it should be, the way it's a point job. And to me, in any issue that come up, we still call the city attorney or the assistant city attorney, and always been helpful. So any issue that came up. So to me, I mean, it's not an issue. Thanks.
Alderman Weigel.
A question, I understand we're going through the hiring process right now.
Yes.
Does it matter to any of the candidates? Is this something that potential municipal attorneys go, well, I wanna see what your structure is. I'm just curious if it's gonna, if one structure or another is seen as atypical or burdensome for our potential new city attorney. Is this something that's been coming up anywhere? Rebecca, do you know, is that a question that's arisen from any applicants, or?
It was a question that did arise in one of our interviews that we conducted so far. The relationship between the city attorney, the city administrator, and the mayor, and how the mayor and the city administrator interact because of the mayor's being a political position and that type of thing. So it was a question, but I don't think the candidate didn't display.
It's not a deal breaker
right.
or a real preference. It was more just the candidate's
Just
curiosity
understanding.
Want to know what the environment we're working with. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't going to go down a path that was going to be, problematic for us to find the right fit for the job, so.
Alderman Lysick.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with your assessment. I really think that the city attorney's position should report to the city administrator. I don't see it being a really workable solution, having 10 council members, having the city attorney report to the mayor and 10 council members. I see politics becoming involved in that, to be quite honest, and I think we want to keep the city attorney's position as politics-free as we can. And I know that's not entirely possible, but I think on a day-to-day basis, reporting to all of our other department heads do, is the right way to go. I don't see the city attorney's position as being any different than any other department head. We have the ability to contact any department head. We have the ability to contact the city attorney's office, ask questions, get opinions and advice. But I don't think that we want to leave ourselves in a position where we have one alderman directing the city attorney to do one thing, another alderman calling up the next day and saying, no, need you to work on this for my committee, and Alderman Haas calling up the next day and saying, no, I need this for finance committee, this is your priority, and I think that leaves the city attorney sitting in a position where, who do I report to? Who's the biggest one that I have to satisfy? And I think all of that, when it comes to those types of decisions, should go through our city administrator. She's working with the department heads, all the department heads on a day-to-day basis. She knows what's going on, and what is important, what other tasks the department heads have, what might be more important for the city attorney to be working on, and something that a particular alderman wants to work on at that time. And so I really think it's much more, what's the word I want to say, logical to have the city attorney report to the administrator.
All right.
Mr. Chairman.
Alderman Chablusky.
Yeah, it's no different than now. You have every alderman calling every department requesting something, on a regular basis, and there's no problem with any of that now. Truthfully, I prefer to have an elected city attorney, but I understand the circumstances that, you never know what you're gonna get. And so I can reluctantly agree with having somebody appointed, but I want that person as free from anybody watching over their back for every movement they make and determining how their movement should go. Meaning that you should work on this before this. And I know that there was problems with the past city attorney on some of those issues, even though he was independent.
All right. Any further discussion? We got to vote on this one.
We're voting on it tonight?
Well, we don't have to vote on it tonight if you don't want to. I think it would be appropriate to vote on tonight, but if the,
I'll make the motion to have the city attorney go just under the council, the mayor and common council.
yeah, specifically option A.
Well, option A just says mayor.
Yeah, option A says mayor.
Mayor, okay.
It's mayor and common council.
Mayor,
Option A2.
A2. Okay. So we have a motion from Alderman Chablusky that we adopt option A2. Is there a second?
I'll second.
And we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
So it's 3-2, well, 2 in favor, 3 opposed, so then the motion fails. So then, that brings us to option B.
I'll move, I'll move for option B.
Okay. And I'll second that. Any discussion on option B?
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So is this gonna be a change in the charter ordinance, or is this something that could be changed by committee or council action if 2 years from now we're going, this isn't working out well, or we could, even if it was a charter ordinance, we could change it. What would it take to change it in
Mr.
the
Chair.
future? Not that we wanna flip-flop it.
Yeah, this information was not included in the charter ordinance specifically for that reason, I think, when you first discussed it. So it would be, just a regular ordinance change and then, possibly a policy or two that might need to be changed, as with any department head.
And once again, we're not restricting our pool of possible applicants with this. Is there a perception that only one applicant so far even asked about it?
We've only
Yeah,
had
we've
one
only had
interview, to be honest.
Yeah.
How about
We had
anybody in
a
the
whole-
municipal attorney business in the room that might weigh in on what the current market is? Any idea, Cheryl?
Yeah, and I can tell you also my
Oh, that's right.
perspective. That's right. It doesn't matter. Everyone expects to be reporting to somebody. And as far as really who that person is not all that important.
But how many people could be?
Yeah,
That's the question here. Is it one person, or is it 11 or 12 or whatever, however you wanna look at that?
Yeah. Which is, it's, yeah, inherently more complicated when you're reporting to 11 people.
That's how
versus
I'm
one.
looking at it.
Yes.
Now, the only problem I have, I report to my wife, and that's it.
So we have a motion and a second for option B. Any further discussion? Then all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed?
No.
Okay, so it's 3 in favor, 2 opposed. Alderman Rote, you voted aye?
Yes.
Thank you. So, and then, so option B passes then. All right, and is there anything else appropriate to come before our committee?
Mr. Chair, I move we adjourn.
We have a motion, is there a second? Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, we're adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Dies for lack of second.
See you here for.